Hello and welcome to another Reaconteur video, and in today's video I will be going over why the Deepwoken lore just keeps getting worse with every edition. Because there's some new lore I want to talk about, and a lot of it is kinda silly. Make sure to subscribe since only about 20% of the people watching right now are actually subscribed. And now let's get straight into it. First of all, let's talk about Bloodrend, the new attunement, or the newest attunement. Whenever the devs retcon something, it always gets really inconsistent in lore because we now have to adjust to what the game was, to what the game technically always was, because the lore just kind of inexplicably changes. So it goes from, this thing doesn't happen, this doesn't exist, to, well, this actually always existed and you just kind of have to suspend your disbelief for a minute. Initially, we believe Chaser was one of the two students of the Second Prophet taught to use the Bloodrender attunement. However, we now see 3 random students that we have to kill, when to our knowledge, blood was a pretty secretive thing only taught to a select few people. So Varelda makes sense, Chaser also makes sense, but those little randoms that you have to fight to obtain Bloodrend kinda don't make sense. Why do these little randoms have the potential of Chaser and Varelda that the Second Prophet recognized in order to agree to teach them Bloodrend? But okay, maybe they just happen to be the strongest students of Bloodrend, and the Second Prophet also accepts scrubs into his little group of students or whatever. But even if that's the case, why do we learn Bloodrend from Varelda exactly? It just feels kind of lazy. Rather than adding the Second Prophet and expanding on the in-game lore, we just get Varelda. What could have been a super cool NPC and quest edition that expands the ministry lore, we got a girl who wants you to kill 3 people because she doesn't like them, and a person who is dying on a table. Only slightly disappointing. Also, Bloodrend, we not only see Varelda using it, attempting to heal and failing to heal, but she also says that it can be used to heal people, and there's regenerative properties to it. So this brings up 2 points. First of all, you're a trainer who can't properly masterfully use the attunement to its fullest potential on your own. That doesn't really check out, and it adds more reason for why there should have been a quest where you either maybe join the ministry as a contractor, or you pretend to join the ministry after getting good rep with them to get Bloodrender and then leave the same way Varelda did. Because she just doesn't seem qualified to teach the attunement when, you know, she kind of needs help in order to properly use it, which we see her do when we're doing the quest to unlock Bloodrender. And second of all, why are there no support mantras? Blood Wisp doesn't count. There are no support mantras, and when we literally see her using it to try and clot someone's blood to heal them, why can't we do this? It would be so easy to just make a support mantra like Reinforce, but it stops damage over time effects and bleeding effects, other than that caused by Deferred, because then it would just make Deferred useless. But then maybe, I don't know, get rid of the positive damage that certain enchant effects have or something. But it would make sense, seeing as how we literally see it used or potentially used in this way. So just making it an anti-bleeding and damage over time mantra would make a lot of sense. Or even add blood hardening that gives extra defense like Reinforce, but maybe it's like a bit stronger than Reinforce, but then it comes with the slight downside of using up blood to do so. And then it would also be pretty cool because that means that this could potentially change the meta, as it would be more of a side grade to Reinforce, since you wouldn't have Grand Reinforce, which is what most people use Reinforce for. So you could get this for the actual defensive non-stalling benefits of Reinforce for Bloodrender while saving yourself the points that you're going to put into Fortitude anyway. So this could actually be a new way to kind of change up the meta. This fits in perfectly because Deepwoken is already full of anime references, and this is like Choso's Hardened Blood, which he uses in the fight against Yuji, but also it's like a real support mantra for Bloodrend within the capabilities that we know it has based on what we've seen in the game and heard about it. Up next, I want to talk about Gunsmith Rosen, the only NPC I've ever hated, even though, I mean, not really an NPC because, well, yeah, he is, but he's not in the game. Anyway, Gunsmith Rosen is responsible for the creation of the 2 lamest weapons in the game. Well, not the lamest anymore, but only one of them is. Rosen's Hellflame and the Storm's Eye. In lore, Rosen doesn't actually create schematics for weapons. Instead, he finds broken pieces of weapons from older times and reverse engineers and improves them, basically making better versions of old weapons which he finds from like the pre-title world. He also invented guns, or at least rediscovered them, in the Deepwoken world, introducing the game's world to the Second Amendment of the United States of America. Now this is interesting because all of these guns came from a pre-title era, meaning the Deepwoken world before the Song and Magic came into existence had guns, which means hypothetically Deepwoken could be the real world, which, right, think about it this way. What if we in modern day, who currently have no magic, discovered magic and then abused it until the tides came, and now 300 years after the destruction of what we know as the modern world, we've got magic, or at least the remaining people have magic, and then some people go back to the drowned world and cities to find relics which they turn back into weapons which we once had, those being guns. But that's just a theory. Anyway, Hallowtide. Hallowtide is a very strange thing because it's all canon to happen in lore, but kind of without much explanation. Realistically, what do you think is going on when every year for a 2-week span a floating island comes out of nowhere and this guy gives you a mask and says, scare people and I'll give you stuff? First of all, where is he getting all of this infinite stuff? Does he have a super cracked PvE build that he farms Diluvian mechanism with for infinite rain spires I'm getting from him? Like, actually, 900 joy deep and not 1 moon's eye, by the way. Anyway, right? What if he's just like farming the Diluvian mechanism in hell mode for like the entire year, and then he comes and gives away all of his stuff within this 2-week period, right? Maybe, but also when you go get things from him, he asks you how much joy you harvested. Why can't we just lie? Our character isn't even completely sure, stating, oh, I think I have about 1 more billion joy, and then he just keeps track of our items from there. So why can't I just say I have 1 trillion joy and get infinite moon's eyes? And if he knows how much joy we have, then why does he make us count? More than likely, they're also multi-dimensional beings having created costumes and such inspired by the various classes and races of Rogue Lineage. So it's likely they just like to spread the dread that playing Rogue Lineage invokes on people, so they're actually probably super evil, and that's why they come every 2 weeks to give us these cursed gifts. First of all, he gives you the mushroom costume. Scrooms were the #1 race for farming grips in Rogue Lineage. What if putting the Scroom costume on fills you with the PTSD and experience of what it was like to be a non-metal Scroom back in the days of Rogue Lineage? This has to be secretly evil, so maybe the costume is possessed with the spirit of all the Scrooms that were murdered for Ultra classes. Now back to layer 2. So I know I've talked about Chaser being in a time loop a lot before, but actually Chaser isn't in a time loop, rather a weirdly dilated time zone, kinda. Basically, the closer a being is to the sign of Etheron, the slower they experience that time dilation alone, meaning that the Chaser isn't still down there because he's in a time loop. Instead, he's down there, and the reason why we keep killing him is because time is so slow for him that for him and his soul's perspective, he hasn't even died yet. We haven't fought him. Which means that for 1,000,000 years, he could be doing nothing, and then the next 1,000,000 years, depending on how slow this time dilation is, he could be experiencing infinite deaths all at once in like less than a second, which for him would feel like 1,000,000 years. Which is probably so much worse than just being in a time loop, because Chaser isn't dying one time infinitely from his perspective. He is not dying at all, and then one day he's going to experience the millions of deaths players have caused him all at once. And he knows when it's going to happen too, because he has like this special watch that keeps track of this time dilation for him. So one day he's going to be watching that countdown, and then boom, eternal damnation just strikes him. He's going to just be in unimaginable amounts of pain from then on. Now back to Archmage's lore character, which I've talked about lore characters very little. Archmage's lore character, however, is Hosk Vantage, who is of course played by Archmage. He sometimes comes into the game, and he has the ability to turn the immaterial things into material things, like souls, mantras, and basically just like, he could turn power into a physical structure. That's kind of what his like bell does, right? But also in lore, he has committed crimes which are so heinous and terrible, he will never be forgiven for them. Which is where he gets the chains around his body, because like his power was like banished and sealed, right? So that's all good and well, but some punishment, because those chains provide 20% damage resistance, which is crazy. Anyway, given the fact that he has committed sins so bad the world will never forgive him, I wouldn't put it past him to be racist. So in my head, I believe Archmage's lore character is a terrible racist, and add that to the list of his heinous actions, because that's one of the things that he did, and this is guaranteed. Anyway, back to what I was saying. A lot of you know about the Central Luminant, right? It's the Central Authority's Luminant, it's where their headquarters are held, it's where all this stuff is happening with the Central Authority, where they plan to take over Etris and all that stuff, right? Now, the Central Luminant is cool and all, but there is one Luminant that actually interests me more, which is the Northern Luminant, which is not talked about nearly as much. The Northern Luminant you see is a completely frozen tundra. The Northern Luminant is home to the Edenkites, who I guess live in temples like the Greybeards, except, you know, they're talking dragon serpent things instead of old men that can talk to dragons. The temperature in the Northern Luminant is also super cold, being nearly lethal if you're exposed to it for too long. Sound familiar? Rogue Lineage. It all always goes back to Rogue Lineage. The most northern part of Rogue Lineage's map is the Tundra. Deepwoken's northern luminant is Tundra. This goes back to my theory that the Meat Lord is Dorgan, and Rogue Lineage is either a prequel or a sequel to Deepwoken, depending on how you like to see it. But regardless, the Northern Luminant could actually be super cool. Imagine if we have to go there to obtain some sort of knowledge of a new progression system, so we have to travel through a Tundra, more like Rogue Lineages and less like Layer 2, which is a bit too linear. And then we find Tundra villages and stuff before we reach a temple where we gain knowledge from the Edenkites and ascend to like a greater plane of existence or something. That would be really cool, because honestly the Central Luminant sounds kind of mid. I don't like war, unless it's for oil, of course, so the Central Luminant with the Central Authority and more stuff honestly sounds less interesting to me than my own concept of the Northern Tundra Luminant. And then we could maybe hear whispers from the body of the Elder Edenkite which was killed, because apparently the body still lies exactly where it died. So maybe we go to the body and we get whispers from it, and it teaches us stuff like words of power from Skyrim. Get me on the dev team now. These are elite ideas. Anyway, that's all for today's lore video. I hope you all enjoyed. Of course, these are mostly jokes, but, you know, some of you take it a little bit too seriously because you love glazing Deepwoken lore. Anyways, shoutouts to Goobka, Cyberboy21, and Drizzy Drake fan. I love you all. Have an amazing day, and goodbye.